Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fond du Lac Area Women's Fund Project Table Talk, where we delve into topics that are sometimes not discussed openly in a forum that is very public. Today, we are going to be continuing the third in a series, a special series on mental health. And I'm really excited to have three guests here today. We have someone new, Elizabeth Nelson, who is with NAMI of Fond du Lac. She is the executive director there. And then we also have Keziah Love and Caitlin Keneally, two local therapists that practice here in the Fond du Lac area. And they are also our Women of Achievement coming up here for our annual Power of the Purse luncheon. Elizabeth, as well, is a Shiro and will also be recognized during that upcoming event, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Today, we are continuing this series on mental health, and we decided to embark on this topic to bring more awareness. That is the whole idea behind this year's luncheon, and the reason that we've chosen to highlight our Women of Achievement as well as about 20 Shiros at the event. This is in direct response to what all of us have probably been experiencing in the aftermath of COVID. We did a study last year in collaboration with the other women's funds in northeastern Wisconsin, so Green Bay, Oshkosh, Fox Cities, and Fond du Lac Women's Funds came together to do a research survey 1 year after COVID had struck the northeastern Wisconsin region. We wanted to know what that looked like for local women. And one of the things that immediately rose to the surface was that women were experiencing mental health issues far more seriously than probably anyone even realized. Something like 70 to 80% of the women on this survey indicated that their mental health was moderately to severely affected by COVID-19. So with that, our board of directors decided to implement a new foundational pillar, health and well-being, to what the Women's Fund focuses on. And of course, mental health is part of health and well-being. And so that's kind of how all of this came to be, the conversation surrounding this. And I've been super impressed and excited by the level of conversation that we've had with Keziah and Caitlin. So I'm excited to hear what Elizabeth is able to add to that conversation. So with that, I should note that we have other foundational pillars as well. So I don't want people to think that health and well-being is all we do at the Women's Fund. But if we don't get our arms around our personal health and well-being, I think it's very difficult for women to actually pursue any of these other pillars that we also have in place. So things like leadership development or education, or economic self-sufficiency, and then certainly safety, dignity, and freedom from violence. It all interweaves with each other. So having the conversation of mental health is not just about mental health. I think that no woman is singular. We are all holistic in all of the things that we bring forth and all of the things that make us up. So with that, let's get to the conversation today. And we wanted to talk about the stigma surrounding mental health. So Elizabeth, I'd like to start with you, as I know that NAMI has operated for many years as a nonprofit, not just here in Fond du Lac, but all over the country. There's chapters. Stands for National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. Can you tell us a bit about NAMI Fond du Lac and just kind of what you do here in our community?
Yeah, so NAMI as in itself has been around since 1979. I was trying to go back and find some sheets that like were charitable, but I think we started in Fond du Lac then somewhere in 1990. And I was just talking to Mary Ellen, who was a previous board member, and she was letting me in on a little insight that like we actually had a NAMI established and then it went away and then we reestablished. So the second time around is kind of where we've grown over these years. And so NAMI in Fond du Lac is based solely with volunteers. And so those volunteers then get trained through the state affiliate. So NAMI's at a national and a state level as well. And at the national and state level, they create programs that are evidence-based that then are delivered by those who have lived experiences with mental health, which is what makes it so unique and intriguing and helpful for those who take those trainings. And so in Fond du Lac, we offer a variety such as NAMI Basics, Family to Family. We are currently actively have a family support group, which runs every third Thursday of the month. And it is held by two individuals who have lived experience as well. I don't want to take too much time with those descriptions, but those are definitely on our website, in the national and the state website, if you want to look into those. But those programs really are to bridge the gap between mental health has hit our family and we don't know what to do and we don't have knowledge in it. And so where can we go and find support, knowledge, and some guidance on how to use community resources that are currently out there to assist with mental health in whatever capacity that it impacts your family. And so this year is the first year they've had a full-time executive director, which is myself, which I think is really great, and like a step towards really building what we're seeing in your studies that Women's Fund have done, what Kazai and Caitlin are saying, right? Where this need that meets people where they're at in order to get them where they want to go. So yeah, that's what NAMI and Fond du Lac's got going on.
It's really interesting, Elizabeth, that this all cropped up in 1979. So I'm a little bit older than you ladies are. So I was 9 years old in 1979, living with my parents, and my maternal grandmother would come to visit. And we all knew that there was something different about grandma. At that time, no one had really the words to describe bipolar. And grandma would come and there'd be these odd behaviors. And I'm a kid. I'm like going, there's something that is different about her, but there were no words for our family to put to that, right? And just how she was, the treatment she received at that time was very different than what things look like today. So how she managed her bipolar was with tranquilizers. They made her sleep all the time, right? And so, there was just always this awkwardness, let's just say, as a child growing up with an adult that had a mental illness before a time when people talked about that, right? And not having the words surrounding that. And then when I became older, when society started to change and conversations like this were beginning to be had, I'm like, you know what? Grandma had bipolar, like it was like this aha moment of, realizing that we finally had a word for that. And unfortunately my grandma took her own life about the age that I am. I'm about to be 52 here, April 20th. And it strikes me that today she would have the resources available. Hopefully someone else in her situation today would not feel that the only way out of that is to leave us. So I'm so appreciative to hear about NAMI being available to families. So now let's get to the heart of the conversation surrounding stigma, which I kind of just described. When I grew up, no one talked about this. So Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about the work that NAMI has done since 1979 nationally to address this idea of stigma and having to feel at one point awkward, for lack of a better word, in these situations where individuals had mental illnesses.
Well, I think they just started the conversation, right, and normalized it at like a baseline community level. The story goes that there were two women who were parents in Wisconsin who started NAMI. And so then it kind of bridged from there and went all over. But I think that having NAMI in your community allows for you to have supports that maybe you didn't know that you had, because it could bridge you with a coworker, right? It could bridge you with a neighbor. It could bridge you with a friend of a friend who was like, hey, I went through this program and I learned about crisis planning and I learned about warning signs and I learned who I could, reach on and lean on in times of uncertainty. I think it also has really evolved to help support those who are experiencing mental health themselves. So we have a few programs, right, that are like peer-led, peer-to-peer, people with lived experiences. It's even evolved even more to where there are presentations that those living with mental health could talk about their experience with law enforcement in particular, right, to try and bridge that gap. Going into schools to start to normalize normal mental health conversations or feelings, so that children can see that, hey, it's okay if I need to reach out, or if I express this feeling or this emotion, or that I'm maybe going X, Y, and Z for a certain number of days, but now I know that there's someone who can support me. So I think it's just really trying to empower individuals to reduce the stigma around mental health by supporting our communities through education and outreach. So I think that's kind of just NAMI's overall goal. And I'm thankful that it's all over Wisconsin, because if NAMI Fond du Lac doesn't have anything, the great thing that came from COVID are virtual options. So reach out, right? Someone might know someone who's running a virtual Zoom of peer-to-peer support group that they could reach out to and still get that service.
Interesting that it began in Wisconsin. I love when you can hear of the history of some of these organizations, and especially when they come from Wisconsin women. Yay for that aspect of things. So Caitlin, tell us a little bit about what you've seen amongst your clients when they come to you. Do any of them express that they've felt the stigma within the community, and perhaps that has kept them from coming to counseling sooner? Talk us through what you've seen as a therapist.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's just one form of the stigma, okay? I think even reaching out, right, that it has a stigma associated with it itself. Then getting someone to come in the door and have the conversation, or even start the conversation, there's a stigma affiliated with that. Then if we get into the diagnosis piece, there's a stigma affiliated with that. And then the shame and the guilt. And then let's say they're actually, I mean, these are different steps. So I feel like there's different steps of stigma that we're constantly trying to break. I mean, yesterday alone, I had a woman in here talking about, like, I'm here because I don't want my kids to have to come here and feel that. And then we started talking about that stigma. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's multi-layered, is that it's not just one direction. It's like the whole thing. And the way we kind of, I don't know, pop that bubble is to normalize it. So what you guys were talking about, educating people, giving them the words, and having these open, transparent, authentic conversations that lead towards healing. So I would say, like, not only the stuff that we're dealing with as far as the mental health stuff, but the stigma that's affiliated with it comes in so many layers. And even if we get someone to the point of healing, there is still, I mean, that's where I would say, even me, there is still a stigma that's affiliated with that healing portion, and that we have to break all of those. So, and I think we do that by acknowledging how multi-layered each, like the stigma itself is, and then working through each of those kind of together. So that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple of things that strike me about what you said. One is realizing that there's not just one stigma obstacle to overcome. So there's that initial outreach, overcoming that. I know that is a big deal for a lot of folks, right? There is this perception which is grounded in judgment, and really what stigma is judgment. That if you need mental health services of any form, whether that is to address a situational issue or a chronic issue, that you should feel bad about that in some way, that's a weakness in some way. And unfortunately, I would say that my generation, Generation X, and anyone older, perpetuated that idea, right? So darn, darn us, right? Growing
Right.
up and being a woman, in particular, during the 80s, it was like, well, women can do everything. And what's wrong with you if you stumble in any one of these areas? Like, oh, being a mom is hard. Why? And there's just so much judgment surrounding that. So I think that a lot of women, particularly in Gen X, as we've gotten older, and luckily the conversations have continued around this, I know a lot of my friends waited until our 40s to go to counseling. Like we kept trying. We're going to overcome this. Like, what's wrong with us? Because that was the message that society was giving us. And then finally go. And I know for me, when I decided to get a little help, I was like, why on earth did I wait so long? If I would have just been able to recognize that this is not a weakness, that if it had been accepted, generationally, if it had been accepted gender, from a gender lens, I think there's different issues that both men and women deal with, from a gender lens. And certainly if you add in the piece of, not specifying a gender, that's a whole nother avenue to discuss in terms of stigma and shame and all of those things. But yeah, that's a big part of it, is overcoming some of those things. So Keziah, how about you? What kinds of things have you noticed amongst your clients? I never want to put you on the spot as being someone to speak for people of color, but generally you do like to address how that differs a little bit during these conversations. And I've very much appreciated that perspective. So give us an idea of what you've seen in terms of stigma surrounding mental illness.
Yeah, I piggyback off of Caitlin. I think it's a lot of things that she stated, and it's wrapped up in women of color. It's just a different layer. It's a different layer that comes with it. It takes a lot of courage to, first of all, seek treatment. It's a lot of dedication. There's a lot of effort. But then when it comes to Black women, women of color, when they are seeking treatment, it's more acute. And then that we come from this place of, okay, if I go see a psychologist or a therapist, and if I need to be put on meds, then it's considered that I'm broken, and we are broken, and that it takes away from the strong Black woman. And so when they present themselves or even come and just have a conversation with me, those are the things that are present. Those are the issues. Those are the concerns. And then let's add Christianity and religion to it. It's like, oh, this is going against what I was taught. Like, I'm supposed to go to God for everything. Will I be shunned upon? Where the people in the church look at me differently? Is this saying that I really don't believe that God is a healer? And so it's all those other extra things that come when it comes to the Black woman. And then the major thing when it comes to mental health and the stigma around women of color is that there's not a lot of us in the field. And so that's like the number one, like, I tried this, but I just felt like that last therapist who wasn't a person of color, they didn't validate my experience. They didn't understand where I was coming from. And they really want somebody to understand the background. And no matter how much a person give you, Black women, they always feel like their experience wasn't validated, their story wasn't heard, and that they don't feel that connection. And that's another important thing, to feel connected. And I love how Caitlin talked about the shame. Like, there's shame that comes with that. There's the guilt that comes with that. And it's saying like, man, if I gotta go see somebody, again, I'm weak, I'm broken, and it's no changing that. So I want to keep this image of being strong and Black. So I just don't seek treatment because I don't want to lose that title. And I don't want to see anyone, I don't want anyone to see me in this vulnerable state. And so once that woman comes in and I'm able to say, no, I think this and this, and validating their experience and letting them know that I do understand. And I love also, Caitlin, you brought up like this is also within the women of color, being misprescribed, misdiagnosed is another big thing. I don't want to be labeled as that. I know how it is. And, and I think it's just so much that's out there where, people are like scared. Like the first thing you come in, we're getting labeled. And, and being able as that therapist to say, man, I admit it every day. I got anxiety, right? Like, man, I'll see a movie. I'll feel sad. Is that a sign of depression? Well, it could look like that if you see my face, but I'm sobbing because this movie is so darn sad. And just trying to let them see that, it's normal to have anxiety. It's normal to get worked up. But at the same time, we give you the tools and strategies to be able to cope daily with these things, and it gets you by. And it becomes a problem when you don't seek the treatment. It becomes a problem when you just sit with it and you continue to allow yourself to get buried under this rock, and you never come out and tell somebody that you need help. And so I think those are some of the biggest things that I see of women of color.
Thanks for that. I learn so much every time we have one of these conversations, which I hope other people are gleaning insights as well. But I didn't even think about the religious aspect of things, which I'm a spiritual individual. I did grow up in Christianity. I'm Presbyterian by label, but that idea of going to God with everything, didn't even strike me. But I know that for people of color, their faith is so often very core to, their daily lives. And so, wow, another piece of understanding that. So thank you for that. I appreciate that a great deal. And I would say, the thing that we can't outrun our mental health, right? Like, so it's interesting that I think for anyone to understand whether you're dealing with anxiety or depression or something that might be characterized as, a larger diagnosis is, it's going to show up somewhere if you don't get it addressed, right? And I think that this idea of constantly trying to work it out by yourselves is misguided. And if we can get to a place as a society that says going to a therapist is on the level of having an annual checkup with your doctor. We go as women annually to get our annual, right? Our OBGYN appointments. We go to see a physician whenever we don't feel good. And so I wish that we would get to a place, and hopefully with conversations like this, activities where people are bringing this to the forefront, that we do get to a place where it is not considered shameful to go and talk to a therapist to sort through emotion, right? We're emotional beings, and why we want to minimize that and outrun that, I don't understand how we got to that place. But I'm thankful that we're getting to a place where it is talked about. So let's discuss that just slightly. One of the things that I don't want to ever do in any of these conversations is just dwell on the negative side of any of the topics that we're dealing with. And I think that in each of these conversations, we've had the opportunity to offer folks some hope related to whatever circumstance they happen to be in. And so let's talk about that just a little bit. I mean, I've already discussed that. I feel like probably within the last five years, I mean, I want to say 10, but I don't even think 10 years ago we would be having this conversation. So I'm going to go within the last 5 years, I have felt the ability to have conversations like this in a far more open and less judgmental place. So Elizabeth, tell me your perspective on that. What do you think on that? And then we'll hear from Caitlin and Keziah after that. But talk to me a little bit about where you feel there's a hopefulness surrounding the idea of shattering stigma for mental health.
I think there's a hopefulness because we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists, we have counselors, we have community members talking about mental health, just as you described before, as your brain is an organ, right? So you need to treat it just as you treat your heart, you treat your liver, you treat maybe a skin rash, and you're going to seek assistance to support that organ. And so I think that the fact that those who do prescribe medications or those who have a little bit more clinical experience than your counselor, but they're all working together to try to bring this message that it is good, right? It is correct. It is what we need to have been doing for years now, is seeing individuals in order to, like Keziah said, to get the tools, to get the techniques, to then start healing, right? Or figuring out how to manage things effectively, just like your house might be dysfunctional, right? Like as in the things, but you figure out how to manage and juggle all of those. And that's what we can do for our brains, right? And so when we flip the script, as Caitlin says, and talking about our mental health as an organ within our body that needs assistance, I think it automatically makes people have relief, right? Like, perfect, let me go get some help for this. So I would say in the last 5 years, that's what's been happening.
Yes, I always say, like, hey, let's call it going to the brain doctor, right? All right, that's what we're going to do today. So, yeah.
Brain health, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Caitlin. What more perspective can you add to that?
Oh, sure. Well, on one hand, I should say I'm an internal optimist, okay? I really am. And I truthfully want to say that this mission is bigger than me. It's bigger than anybody on this call. And so I can see that and I just hold on to that. I really do, like freaking tight. It doesn't make it easy, but I do because it is, right? Let's go to the brain doctor. Let's do it. We have all of these intelligent people all across the scale, as Elizabeth is talking about, or the spectrum, however you want to think about it, wanting to help. And so we just have to keep moving the dial, or like, I don't know, light the thing up. That's my style, right? Let's just go straight for it. But the mission is bigger than me, okay? And I know that, and it's bigger than all of us. And we have to hold on to that and see it. And so that's what I always try to remember, right? That's what my book is about. That's what these things are doing, our events, all of that. And when we lead, whatever you believe in, God, universe, and you know that it's the right thing, and you can be sovereign within yourself, we know we're headed in the right direction. So yes, decades ago, they weren't talking about it. Okay, this is what we know about trauma, intergenerational trauma, like we're getting all of that, but now let's keep moving forward. And then to break the stigma is to treat it the way we treat physical health. So I would ask that, you know, not only do I try to hold on to that, but within my clinical realm, I know that therapy is an art and a science, okay? And so we've got the science down. So now let's figure out the art piece and let's kind of combine those and keep it moving forward. And so that I know is sort of my calling, I don't know. And so I just hold on to that and I keep moving forward.
Awesome. And Keziah, what types of things do you see as hopeful within the last several years related to mental health?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what was said. I think COVID really helped us out a lot. And that might sound strange because we know what COVID has done. Yet it has propelled and pushed families, individuals to seek help, to say, this came and we're all out of whack. I've seen changes within myself, within my children, and we need to talk to somebody about this. And so it's almost a little gratitude for some of these things that has happened in our world, for people to accept therapy, counseling, to just sit and talk with somebody a lot more open and without the stigma behind it. And I also think too, a lot of people are saying, yeah, I might have anxiety or I might have depression. And they're looking at it now too as, you know what, seeing you also makes me a little bit stronger. And they begin to feel really great about themselves. And when they begin to see that they're changing or their mood is changing, their family dynamics is coming together again, they're becoming more acceptant of it, of sitting with someone and talking with someone. So I believe we definitely are headed in the right direction. And I believe it's like things like this, with Women's Fund, with what they're doing and allowing powerful women like us to come and share our experience and what we see is another thing where people gravitate to this. They see the video and they're like, wow, I needed to hear that. And those are the things that get people off their couch, out of the bed, and go knock on that door and fill out that application and say, I need help. I don't know what's going on, but I know that me just sitting here is going to get me on the right track. And that's where a lot of people are at right now in life. And so, yeah, I definitely believe we're headed in the right direction.
I would say I love that perspective on COVID. I agree with you, believe it or not. I think that now that we're coming on the hopefully the down cycle of the pandemic, we can all look at it as somewhat of this shaking all of us into consciousness is the way I like to refer to it. It was basically this idea of the world is moving too fast and maybe we should slow down. So let's do an entire shutdown of the world, right? And we're going to think about who we are, what has been going on, how healthy we all are, what our family structures look like, what we look like individually. And, so I agree with you that there is some gratitude to have for the pandemic, bringing us this insight that I don't know that we would have ever gotten if we had just continued on with the way our society is just constantly running from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And so getting that little bit of slowdown and perspective, and I think it has been hugely beneficial. So Elizabeth, one last question. If someone listening to this today is struggling either themselves or has a family member, a partner, a friend, a coworker, and isn't really knowing how to support that person, what resources are available through NAMI Fond du Lac or NAMI in any of the communities where someone might be living that they can tap into, like a website, a phone number? Can you help us out with those resources?
Yeah, so for NAMI Fond du Lac in particular, it would be just reaching out via phone or email. And so the phone number is 920-979-0512. I just want to remind anyone, if they're in crisis or they know someone in crisis, though, to call the county crisis line, which is 920-929-3535. But then there are on our website little buttons that you could click if you're interested in any one of the programs that we're offering. But I think what I've learned is you got to start following every NAMI Fond du Lac page, right? They post where their signups are. They post what programs they're running. They post what support groups are virtual and what are not. There is always an ability on the NAMI national website to find even national. So I've had volunteers and program facilitators tell me they had someone from Texas join because maybe their area in Texas wasn't running something and they were able to do it virtually within the state of Wisconsin. So look at those. And you can always call and send an email and reach out, and I'm full of resources and I love to share people to everyone else because that's also part of ending the stigma, right? Is sending them to the places that can serve them and not trying to do it alone. So yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. Well, I am so appreciative of each of you. The last in our 3-part Project Table Talk series. However, we are going to hear from Caitlin and Keziah one more time at the upcoming Power of the Purse event on April 27th. From 11:30 to 1 o'clock at the Radisson in Fond du Lac here. Tickets are still available only through April 22nd. So Friday, April 22nd, we will be cutting it off. There's only about 25 tickets remaining. We're almost to sell out of 400, which is so phenomenal to, again, coming back together, getting to network with people, getting to learn, hugely excited, getting to celebrate the 20 Sheroes, of which Elizabeth is one. And we've got other women in the community working in the field of mental health. And of course, our two women of achievement, Caitlin and Keziah, also working in that field and raising up awareness surrounding this topic. So get your tickets, www.hometowntickets.com/purse, and we will see you all there at that event. In the meantime, we'll resume our regular Project Table Talk schedule on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays at 1 o'clock in May, with topics coming up on women's health, but from a little bit different perspective. We're going to be looking at health and wellness related to actual women's reproduction and body and things like that. So shifting from the mind to the body in May, and also children in foster care, because May is both Women's Health Month as well as Foster Care Awareness Month. So 2 more topics that we're going to tackle in May, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you.